Welcome back to ADHD Realities. I'm your host, Dr. Leanne Borneman, clinical sexologist and ADHD expert. And this is the podcast. We talk all things ADHD and sexuality in a way that even the science is lacking. And today's episode, oh my gosh, is it dysregulated as all hell. I have my friend and my colleague, Dr. Jessica McCarthy, a clinical psychologist and neuropsychologist and fellow ADHD-powered truth teller. And this episode might be a little hard for some of you listeners out there. We get pretty raw, emotional, dysregulated, all about things regarding how hard it is to live in a neurotypical world with a neurodivergent brain, why diagnosis can be both validating and also limiting, and what it really means to hold yourself accountable without bypassing your needs. We talk systems, social media myths, grief, coaching, chaos, and everything in between. If you've ever thought, why is this still so damn hard even after I know I have ADHD, then this one's for you. And we're either going to piss a lot of people off or we're going to validate a lot of people. Either way, let's get into it. Today I have Dr. Jessica McCarthy with me, who is a neuropsychologist, clinical psychologist, and I think you and I are going to be doing things a little bit abstractly. I'm going to use that word. I have a feeling that even though I had like a bunch of questions and ideas of what I wanted to do today, I don't think it's going to come to fruition. I think what's going to come to fruition is you and I having a vent session, a professional vent session, and an exploration around some topics that are maybe taboo, maybe uncomfortable even for some people to hear as we explore these. You and I make it heated together. I think I just kind of want to go organically with this.
Have some fun today, I think.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
So before we get into all the fun, I always like my guests to just introduce themselves to everyone. Give us a little bit more information on who you are, your background, so we kind of know what we're dealing with.
Sure. So I'm Dr. Jessica McCarthy. Like Leanne said, I am a licensed clinical psychologist, neuropsychologist, and also a certified school psychologist, although I have not practiced in the schools in a hot minute for obvious reasons, as I'm sure you all can imagine why. I am the founder and clinical director of a practice called Element Psychological Services in New Jersey. We have a location in Bergen County and Montvale in northern New Jersey, and we also are just getting ready to open a second location in Morris County, which is more central New Jersey. So we're very excited about that. We do both neuropsychological assessments, specializing in the neurodivergent population. So we do primarily evaluations on ADHDers, autistics, and those with learning differences, especially dyslexia. But we also do psychotherapy, some of the traditional stuff, as far as children to adults. But I really try to pull in people who are specialists. So one of the my newer additions to the staff, we have a registered play therapist who specializes in working with the littles with ADHD and autism. Play is how children communicate. I am not the one to work with little kids, so that's why we have Tara on. Definitely not. You'll understand why after today. So our mission is to just really educate and empower everyone that comes in our door, neurotypical or neurodivergent, and really destigmatize the seeking and utilization of mental health services and have a little fun while we're doing it.
Awesome. I love that. And I don't know if anyone is already feeling the vibe, but you've got two professionals in the room, two experts in the room that aren't your typical hoity-toity. We curse, we get nitty-gritty, and I think
as I'm chugging Celsius in the beginning, and I've got a second one on deck, and the meds are hitting, so we'll see.
4 shots of espresso in this puppy, and I also took
I gotta tell you something about that. Because of you, I have changed my Starbucks order because it never occurred to me to add espresso shots. So now when I go, it's at least 3, usually 4. And if I do 3 espresso shots, I'm like, oh, this is so weak. Like, what am I doing? But every time I order coffee, I think of you. So thank you for that.
That is gold. Yeah, no, it's my go-to. So here, okay, let's start with something simple, right? So obviously, this podcast is about ADHD. I like to try and pull as much information and help my listeners to the best of their abilities. So I think what I really just want to jam out with you today on is this concept of us living in a neurotypical world and the expectations attached, because that is the focal point of everything I do. And I feel like as you and I have talked in the background, in some capacities, that's exactly what you're doing too. Like you're helping your clients better navigate this world. But, at what point is it, you know, I don't,
I
I don't
know,
want to.
right? Like we were talking about this beforehand. It's like, how do you say the thing without possibly getting like slammed or chastised for it?
Well, I think,
It
you
doesn't
know
need to be
what?
said.
I think the best way to do this is I'm going to put it on me, right? I've had days where I know how helpful it is to be mindful of how my ADHD shows up through my past experiences and doing that post reflection and then setting it up for, quote, my success, whatever that may be. But I also know that I can't do that in every dynamic. And so there is this level of forced masking. I'm gonna call it that. It's like the suck
Mm.
it up buttercup. You're just gonna have to deal with it because if you want that, then you have to do this. And I think the first thing I think of is parenting, right? Like parenting is not ADHD friendly. I have to
No.
show up and do what I got to do because I chose to be a parent. But like just thinking in the outside realm, we live in this world that is constantly reminding us of this. And it's like there's no fix to our experiences. We can only manage and try to adjust to the best of our abilities. But it's like, how do you help your clients operate the constant tug of war between trying to navigate versus the realities of the world we just live in? Am I making sense here?
Yes. I think I think part of it, as a behavioral therapist and that kind of a third wave acceptance and commitment based approach, I think we spend a lot of time on goal setting and not just in like a typical like either ADHD or even like behaviorist fashion, but like really getting into like what we know about what works for ADHDers. So for example, like having flexibility with schedule and in the type of job that you do and like, okay, but what are you actually doing to apply for a job? Like if you keep applying for the same type of job over and over and you're failing at it and it's directly not what we've talked about, well, then what are you doing? Why do you keep doing what you know is not working? Is it because what society is telling you? Is it because what other people are telling you? Is it because what you think you should be doing? Like this ingrained in us trajectory of what life should, hate that word, at like
I know.
20s, 30s, or 40s. You know, conversely, I tend to use extreme examples with my patients because I think it works. I I am not going to ever run a 2-hour mile. No matter how many accommodations, modifications I make, my body is not set up to run a 2-hour mile. I'm sorry, not a 2-hour mile, marathon.
Mm-hmm.
I think I could do a 2-hour mile. I'm not doing a 2-hour marathon
Mm-hmm.
ever.
Yeah.
And as much as I might want to do that, there are realities that if I've got a choice, I can either wrap my head around it and manage my expectations about what I want to do when I run, or I
Mm-hmm.
can keep beating my head against the wall. And now I've got two problems. The, you know, a goal that's not working, and then the dirty aftermath of what constant failure looks like and what that does to us, on an emotional and a mental health level. Because if someone says to me, like, I can't keep a job or I can't do this, my question is, okay, well, what's the pattern here? ADHDers are supposed to be very good at pattern recognition, and autistics because our brains are just wired differently. And I swear, I can see the matrix sometimes. Like I'll be in session, I'll be in therapy, and I'm like, I tell like my clients know, I'm like staring out the window or staring at the wall, but like I'm listening in the background, and then boom, I just tie it together, and they're like, what just happened? I said, that's just the way that my
Mm.
brain works. So I want to teach people to pay attention to their patterns, and if you see the patterns, why the fuck do you keep doing it?
Yeah.
Why are you causing yourself this misery? Because honestly, that's not an ADHD thing. It's not. That is a like breaking the societal norms of how we think we need to be showing up in this life and what we should be doing based on what's been, you know, brought, handed down to us in our 20s, 30s, 40s, whatever.
Yeah.
It's a huge part of what I do. It's literally pattern recognition and really hard radical acceptance about the expectations and goals that you're setting for yourself.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm going to even take it one step further, not one step further, but I think this
Take it,
kind of,
darling.
I think this is going to pull me into that other piece. Like you just said, that's not an ADHD thing. And you're right, it's not an ADHD thing. And this is one of the things that infuriates me when we go into the topic of social media and coaches. It is a mental health diagnosis. What you just talked about right there is barriers and layers associated with whether it be anxiety, depression, trauma, if somebody is experiencing rejection sensitivity, those are mental health related dynamics. And so, what you're talking about is even people in general with an ADHD diagnosis not being then actually supported if they're going outward to people that don't have a mental health perspective, qualification, license to actually be able to give attention to those really important areas that then, yes, can indefinitely make our symptoms as ADHDers worse. And then so
Mm-hmm.
maybe we have more barriers there, but you're right. You're talking about something deeper here. And I wrote a few things down on my page as you were talking because I think one of the things for me was is that like the realities of the world and I loved the example you gave about the marathon because what you were doing there is saying that sometimes we just don't have what it takes to do certain things and not for nothing why is that so wrong, right? Like, why is it wrong that we're not perfect, that we can't do everything? But I do believe that when we have this diagnosis of ADHD, it almost as if I see also a lot of people lean into their diagnosis as the
I can't
reason
stand that.
for it, when in
Yeah.
reality, it might just be it's not your cup of tea.
Yeah.
And can you be okay with it? Can you learn to be okay with it so you don't keep repeating the same failure over and over again, whatever that may be, and you're able to finally succeed in the way that you deserve? Am I making
It's
sense here?
Yes, and it's interesting. So as a neuropsychologist, and look, I graduated with my doctorate in 2015. So like when I was in school and I trained in hospitals, I worked in medical rehab, like I was trained on the medical model. I was trained to diagnose as a neuropsychologist, as a doctoral level psychologist. That is my specialty. That is what I do. I have pediatricians refer to me. I have neurologists refer. I have master's level clinicians. I have other clinical psychologists who like they're more therapists. Our job is to diagnose. I have been trained to use tools to clarify diagnoses because especially in the world of ADHD, the diagnoses can be incredibly messy and nuanced. And as a neuropsychologist, it's funny, like when I can get my like head out of my ass for a little bit with all the things going on in Maycember, like I, as a neuropsychologist, I'm like almost ashamed to say that like I still use the medical model because I feel like I'm going to get shit on by my colleagues. Now, with that being said, I have always wrote more neuroaffirming reports and discussed things in the context of strengths because when I spend hours and hours with someone, I'm getting to know them as a person. Why the hell wouldn't I use that in the
Yeah.
report? I'm talking about this person as a whole. That's always how I've done reports. But I think it does become problematic when everything that someone can or can't do hinges on a diagnosis.
Yeah.
And I just turned 43. I was diagnosed with ADHD late. And I sit on a and I'm also a single mom. So like I legit have the cards stacked against me every day in terms of the level of supports that I need to get through
Mhm.
versus what is actually available to me. And I I, I think that we need to be thinking a little bit broader about I am not my diagnosis. I am, and again, this is the medical model. Like I am a person with a diagnosis, and I'm going to get shit on for this. But when everything hinges on a diagnosis, well, I can't do this because I have ADHD. I can't do that. I struggle because I'm like, you know what? There's truth to this on the one hand, because the world we live in
Mhm.
is not set up. It is not set up. On the other hand, why is that the stop point? And like that's a lot of the work that I do in therapy. Why do we hit a wall when we come up against our diagnosis? And look, there are parts that I love about the neurodiversity movement and educated because people need to be educated. just because you have ADHD or autism, or you're an ADHD or autistic. I did it right there, right? Um, that should be celebrated. Who gives a fuck if you're different? I don't care. I'm different, right? But I was programmed with the medical model and the ableist mentality of the suck it up buttercup and like you're a person first. And I still believe that because people need that when they come to me. But then I got to switch lenses in the therapist role. And it's a very fine line between I want to teach you to fiercely advocate and support your needs versus the reality of there are certain things that you might not be able to do. There are certain environments because no matter the environmental modification, you're not going to succeed there. And we don't talk enough about it. It's, we're different, and differences are great. And yes, they are. But then I've got people in here suffering because they're being told their differences are great online and that, the world should be supporting them. And it's just fucking not. It's not, because change doesn't happen overnight. I wish it did. Put me out of a job, please. Let me go live on an island somewhere and fucking drink coconut water and meet a hot island man. Like, that's fine. But like, I think we need to take, like, we went too far one way with the medical model and being like, everyone's a disease and a disorder and impaired. I think we're too far in this direction now. Like, I hope the pendulum settles down somewhere a little bit between acceptance and advocacy and realities.
And I think you're speaking volume to how the societal norm around these concepts become, right? Like they become trends. I'm going to use trend because I feel like that's exactly what's happening, right? You just said, we went one way with the pendulum, right? Where the medical model was like abusive, it was toxic. And then
in certain contexts and with certain patients.
Correct. Like, right. Like when we think of the medical model, I always know that it is a very helpful tool for a lot of people. But then there are those nuances when we're talking about behavioral health and things like that. And that's where you have to have like a little bit of fluidity between
1000%.
right? And so I think what you're talking about too is right now we're on this trend of instead of, and I'm going to be bold to say this, instead of teaching people to go from one spectrum to the other side of the spectrum, we're not teaching people to lean into the discomfort that your differences may not always be accepted. And you can be educated, which you need to be, on how you're showing up, what that looks like, how you could advocate for yourself. But at the end of the day, you're still relying on an environment, which includes people. And that means that those people, that environment may not always be able to support you. You can't control everything. We love that when we can because it makes us feel empowered. And we even know that maybe we should be able to. But that is not, like you said, the realities of the world we live in. And so when people get trapped into this idea that ADHD, the diagnosis is their identity, I think people get trapped in this idea that it should be the enabling narrative to just give people what they may want access to that they are struggling to for whatever reasons may be. I don't want to discredit people here, but that is the realities too of how we navigate and live in this world.
There is a small body of research in the autism literature, and I don't remember who, but who went so far to say, and I would guess that this would probably apply to ADHDers as well, that there is almost a personality disorder component to people who lean too far in to their diagnosis. And like people flip shit when that came out. And I'm like,
that's interesting. I've never heard of that.
I don't necessarily disagree. It's like a couple studies. It was like this guy got, I have to look it up. This guy got shit on for it. But I'm like, like but then I'm also like, well, why do we have to label it? Why do we have to label it? Is it autism? Is it personality disorder? I mean, there we go again. This is both. Dr. Stephen Hayes, who is like the godfather of acceptance and commitment therapy, he wrote an article, a seminal article, as we say in graduate school, I don't even remember, a couple decades ago, talking about how we should basically burn the DSM and everything needs to be on a functional, contextual continuum. Like diagnosis doesn't matter, with the exception of certain things like schizophrenia and bipolar, where those are kind of into themselves. But even then, like fitting on this continuum of function and context. And what do you need to function? What supports do you need to function? So like he was, I think, already talking about neuroaffirming practices
And that's
long
funny.
before we even called it that. And honestly, that's how I practice, so much to the point where my office manager, Jackie, like, we use an EHR. Like I forget to enter people's diagnoses into the system, and then they go to submit to insurance, and Jackie's like, can you just like fucking go in and put the diagnosis in? The system needs to be more user friendly. It's not. But like, I know someone's diagnosis in my head, and their treatment plan is evidence-based based on what I know about the diagnosis. That's here. But then I'm also like, okay, well, what do we need to function? What
Yeah.
are your functionality goals? What's realistic about it? What's your level of awareness like around it? And like, and let's go from there. Like, I don't give a shit about diagnosis. I don't.
Mm-hmm.
But yet we need to, for a couple of reasons. Number one, insurance. We have to. I'm sorry, that's the world that we live in.
Mm-hmm.
And number two, as much as I don't want to minimize someone who's hardcore like neuroaffirming, I also don't want to discredit the people that come into my practice who have substantial support needs, AKA the borderline to impaired range on the bell curve, if we're talking about this in the medical model, who are like, there is no fucking superpower to what I have to deal with. Like, my child, my loved one might not ever live independently. And what the fuck am I going to do about that? Because this world out there, it does not set up, it's not set up to really support
Yeah.
substantially impaired slash, substantial support needs beyond mid-20s.
Yeah.
So who am I to be like, you're different and special and celebrate that? We do, but it's like when someone literally needs help with their ADLs, can't manage a checkbook, can't drive, don't have levels of independence. I'm not breaking out a song and dance for them.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's, if we're talking, it's ironic because if we're talking about neuro inclusivity, when we lean too far one way, like we are leaving people out.
Yeah, and it's funny you say this. I actually just saw a post on Threads of somebody saying that they would really like to see more people on social media talking about the severe ADHD presentation, right? Like we don't see
Yeah.
that in the work, or not the work, but like the social media and everything
No.
that's going on. We see the jokes and things. And I was telling you this before, like I've noticed that even in my content, I have a very niche content. But
Mhm.
even when I'm just trying to post things about ADHD, I've noticed in the data that when I get and post things that are the trend, I get more views, right? Like that's what people want. But you're right, we're not giving enough spotlight to all of the experiences, and I'm guilty of that too.
But the reality of it is, and I'm going to get political for just a second, is I can appreciate in the current political context and climate why we might not be doing that. But the reality of this is that we have never been doing that.
Oh
We
yeah.
went from the medical model where when I was in grad school and we learned about ADHD and autism especially in the more severe presentations. And when I was growing up, we didn't talk about, functioning ADHD. We talked
Mhm.
about the kid the boy who was hyperactive and like throwing chairs around the classroom. Again, more, there might have been other issues going on too, but like who was disruptive. We thought ADHD, we thought behavior issue, hyperactivity, class clown, Momo central moron. That's what we thought
Mhm.
about. I'm going to
Yeah.
name call, right? And then my ass in grad school, when I was having a hard time writing long reports, and shocker, like I have a high IQ. It's the only reason why I've gotten through, and I have anxiety, and feel like my love and my worth was was based on academics
Mhm.
when I was younger. Well, honestly, the only reason why I got through, um, when my therapist, and I've been in and out of therapy since I was a teenager in grad school, because the director of my doctoral program was like, you need to get back to therapy and like figure this out. No one told me I had ADHD. As a matter of fact, everyone told me I didn't have ADHD. You have anxiety, you have OCPD, you have all this shit. And she was a postdoc. She said to me at the end of one session, I'll never forget, she was like, is it possible you have ADHD? And my reaction was like, oh no. Yeah, like literally it was that. And then I'm like, holy shit, she was actually right. But we talk a lot about those stories, But like we don't talk about the kids that might need to go to a therapeutic school. We don't talk about the kids, especially in a school setting, that get diagnosed as like behavioral problems, but it's really they have ADHD. We don't talk about the kids who the system don't catch and end up in jail and and offending and on drugs and drinking problems. We don't talk about the kids who will never be independent, and we don't talk about the impact on the parents and the aging adults who have to take care of that. We're not doing a ton
And
of
I'll
that.
tell you why we don't do
Certainly
that.
didn't do it in that.
Well, I'll tell you why we don't do that. And this is also the problem, is because that's uncomfortable.
Our window of tolerance, put my Celsius down, as a function of social media has gotten less and less. And it is a fucking disservice. And COVID was part of it. Everyone got home. We had to, whatever, but we never rebounded from it. And people get caught in this, the comparison to perfection, but then also the validation that comes from social media when people are like, oh, they're talking about me. So from a behaviorist standpoint, we're not going to go out and do the uncomfortable thing, like going to meet people that are like me, or maybe starting your own, not support group, but just what the hell are those things? Like those like peer groups, those like the groups.
Honestly, what I just
Oh,
went
no.
in, because I'm the kink guru, BDSM over here. I just
Love
think
that.
of munches, like the munches, the luncheons about kink and BDSM. That's what I was just thinking. So maybe something like that.
That's what I'm talking. Yes, girl. It's a whole other podcast. But like we're it's like here's my little window of comfort and like validation and safe space. But it's like you're also going to tell me like you have no friends, no lovers, no life, no this, no that. But what are you doing about it?
See, but I'm going to lean into that, right? Because I think that's what we're always going back to. And I want to go back to the word of comfort and discomfort, right? And I think I wrote it here somewhere. I'm trying to keep myself on point here with the awesome impulsivity of both of us in this room. But like, keep in mind, for instance, the diagnosis piece that you talked about, right? There are some people that need and want a diagnosis because it's the first time in their life that they're going to get that validation that they did not receive throughout their life. And in that moment, it feels really good. But now what, right? The lack of education, the lack of true support causes then people to feel very helpless. And helplessness is comfortable in the sense of, if we just internalize and say, it's because of my ADHD, it's because of this, we've now created a system for our brain to feel almost like equilibrium, right? Like, it's like, okay, I answered the question, right? I answered the question, even though the answer to the question is not correct. I answered it. Your body can kind of be calm and still. And I think that's what you're talking about, right? Like, okay, so here you come. We're seeing patterns. What's going on? Looking at functionality, because what you're doing and what we have to do is we have to lean in and ask, where are you not showing up, and where are you showing up, and what are the things you're doing that don't work for you? And it's okay if it doesn't work for you, right? Like that's the beautiful thing. That in itself is a conflict.
But we struggle with that.
Well, that's because we live in a society where conflict is seen as negative. No, how you handle it is negative. Conflict is needed for growth. And so if you can get to this point and say, I'm not fitting here because this doesn't work for me, and no amount of accommodation I can throw, or maybe I can throw, but somebody's not going to support, is going to change that. Well, that's a conflict now that allows you either the option to grow or stay stagnant. And if you stay fixed in that mindset, that's the barrier, not your diagnosis, not the environment. That's a you thing. And that is a hard truth.
And we do not talk enough about
that. Well, that's
that.
the self-compassion piece that I teach my clients all the time. We have to grieve ADHD. You have to grieve it, just like Dr. Russell Barkley said. This isn't new. And then you have to lean into self-compassion. And part of self-compassion is understanding that there are just parts of you, your dynamic, your interaction that isn't going to come to what reality is that you want. And then that's part of the grieving process too. You get to grieve and move, or you get to stay stagnant. And then that's a you choice, no matter how hard that is to hear, because at the end of the day, as Abraham Maslow said, we have choice. We always have choice. Choice does not mean easy. Choice means sacrifice. No. Choice
and
means hard.
I think this is one of the biggest disservices of the neurodiversity movement, is that it is not talking enough about, no matter what accommodations. And by the way, I think this is also why there is some kind of, I'll say like whiplash, political kickback, all of that, because it, it sometimes I think can give this like almost this, oh my God, I'm going to get chastised for this, but like this participation medal mentality of
Oh,
like,
yes.
everyone's a winner, everyone is special, everyone is, everyone should have an equal chance. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't. Again, as a school psychologist, we talk a lot about free and appropriate education. We talk about modifying the environment to level the playing field as much as possible. And I will like, that is my like hill to die on, whatever, is that I truly think that we should be giving kids and adults every fucking opportunity to succeed. But I think we need to be very realistic about what, like, the sky is not the limit. There are limits. Let's figure out the direction you want to go in and try to maximize. It literally says on my website, maximizing quality of life. I talk about maximizing quality of life and maximizing functionality. I don't talk about curing. I don't talk, I'm not putting people on the moon. Like, I'm not doing that. And that's okay. And it fucking pisses me off when I have people, and my clients know my style. Like, I will tell people, like, you are wasting my time right now and you're wasting yours. Like,
and some people listening right now are probably shivering up and turned off, and that's okay, right?
You know what?
That means you're not their cup of tea, just like I'm not a lot of people's cup
I'm
of
not
tea.
either. But I'm going to qualify it with this too. Like, I have been there. Like, I have had people sit in my office, be like, oh, like, you're this like blonde-haired, green-eyed, like Caucasian female, and you're not bad looking. Like, you've had the world handed to you on a silver platter. I have struggled with handing in homework since I was in second grade. I have struggled with managing my life. I have struggled with organization. And now as a single parent, by the way, because I chose incorrectly in my partner, because I wasn't doing the work back then, like, that's on me. Now I'm raising a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old, mostly by myself. And I mean, you and I have had conversations about like our house looks like a bomb went off.
I love when we send each other pictures of all the shit everywhere.
It's worse than when I had last sent you a picture. Between, the life events that have been happening just in May, like, there is not an inch of my apartment that is unscathed right now. The only I've sat and I wondered, I didn't start taking meds for ADHD until probably like 2 or 3 years ago. And honestly, the only reason why is my primary care is my best friend from childhood growing up. And I felt comfortable enough to say to her, look, I have ADHD and I'm not medicated. She's like, what the fuck are you doing? I'm like, I know. So like, I'm in the field, right? And I still felt, discomfort around asking for help.
Yeah.
And I also realized the only reason that I got through graduate school, and there's a wall of expensive paper behind me, is because body doubling works for me.
Yeah.
I always had study groups. I never studied alone. I always went to the library, even if I was studying by myself. I didn't like sitting in the study carrels by myself. I sat on the big tables around people. That's where I would do papers too. I would have my headphones on, listening to EDM on repeat, right? Or sometimes my ocean wave sounds, depending on the vibe. And if I did do work by myself in my room, it's because the paper was due in 12 hours and I needed to get my shit together.
Yeah.
Nobody saw the patterns. It was just, oh, Jessica's just special and she's different and she's quirky. No, I almost failed out of college. I had a 1.67 after my first semester at Lehigh.
I'm going to interrupt you for a second and get therapeutic on you for a second.
Ew.
Do you think in some ways your passion and your conviction and how you treat your clients is because you're trying to ensure that they don't make the same mistakes that your environment took away from you because of the lack of knowledge and understanding?
Yep. And I will tell, I am very careful with how I, there are certain clients I won't take, actually, because I'm not at a point yet where I can't keep enough of myself out of the room.
Fair. I think that's actually very important.
My college kids, my 20-something, it's a lot more clear cut. It's like, what are you doing to get in your way? What can I educate you about your brain? Let's talk about the impact of early childhood learning. Like, and not like the inner child stuff, although sometimes that does come up in trauma, but just like, what were you programmed? We were all programmed at something based on what society's taught us and based on what our parents taught us. Let's explore that so you can at least choose differently. I can't prevent people from making mistakes. And I tell people, I'm ride or die with you. You make the mistakes, I'm going to be alongside you. But, my job is to teach you, if there's anything I can do with that, it's teach you pattern recognition
Hmm.
and help you understand like bigger picture. What are your values? How do you want to show up in relationships? What do you want people to do for you? How can you use your voice? How can you advocate? And this is men and women. I see men and women equally in my practice, especially in like the 20s and 30s. And so, yes, it's something I'm very passionate about because if people are going to fuck up, I at least want them to fuck up with better tools.
And also fuck up
You know?
knowing that they still have choice. Because again, if you don't really understand that, there is this level of accountability, and also more importantly, like that not everything is going to work out the way you maybe want or think it should, which is a fair feeling to have. But if you
Mhm.
don't recognize and realize that there's other options after you feel that, you are not equipping yourself with everything to help you succeed. And I want to go back to that fairness piece, because as you were talking about that, right, about this idea of like everyone getting a trophy, two
Mhm.
things popped in my head. One thing, I'm a professor as well. And so, like, for
Same,
instance, I do
which is super
grading.
fun work, by the way. I miss
Yes,
it.
it is. I love it.
Mhm.
And every semester, I have my students in my human sexuality class do an opinion paper. And I call it an opinion paper because I really want to lean into creativity and thought, still using the data, being objective, while then using that data, the empirical studies, to formulate your own opinion. Cool. Okay. This semester, people definitely have been using Chat GPT a little too much. Was not reading a lot of student papers. I was reading a lot of chat papers. And there was this one student in particular who got a very bad grade, did not
Good.
follow the writing rule brick. I mean, I set my students up for success. I give you everything you need. I give you
Mhm.
a rubric. I tell you where I'm grading, no surprises. I give you all the resources between reading, videos, showing you on a screen. Like, I literally give you everything, and then it's on you. It's on
Mhm.
you to take the time. It's on you to find a way to read, watch, etc., and do. Okay. So anyway, they didn't like their grade, and I was going back and
Yeah,
forth
well,
with the
fucking
student.
who?
And one of the things that they said is, it makes me, I'm not going to be able to say it word for word, but basically the student was saying that I don't get how in one breath you can say you can see the effort, but then not reward me for it. And I said, effort does not qualify or quantify as success when we're talking about academics. My role as your professor is to teach you what it means to be successful when we are talking about an academic expectation. And unfortunately, effort isn't enough. And I do see this a lot in the students that I work with and I'm, in this relationship
Yeah.
with, that it's this idea, well, I showed up. Cool. That's
No
not
shit.
enough. Just like, and I'm going to shift over to this example, I'm currently writing a book. I'm
Mhm.
working with an editor, and I use AI to accommodate the areas of my brain that suck, right? My book is my book. It's my writing. But one of the things I suck at because of my deficits is like making things more like ADHD friendly in terms of how you're seeing it. So what I've
Mhm.
used AI for, and I do it for my summaries as well for a lot of my clients, is I like to take what I have created, my shit, and I say, put this in an ADHD format, like bullet points. My brain struggles with that because I have deficits in that planning and like putting everything in
Yeah.
paper.
Mhm.
Okay. She advised me, my editor, that publishers will most likely not accept your work if AI is included. And to me, I was like, well, that's not fair because I know it's my work. I know
Mhm.
that's my work and I'm using it as an accommodation. But in these moments, fair has nothing to do with it. If I want a publisher, I'm going to have to
Yep.
meet the expectations.
Expectations.
I'm having to trust a system I'm not in control of. Now, I can have my moment, get really fucking pissed and be like, poo poo goo, and then
Yeah.
not publish a book, or I can
Yeah.
figure out a way to approach it, whether that be take a couple of months to figure out a new approach that I can find a way to do this so I can access the systems that I have been advised. This is how you access it. Is it fair? Absolutely not. I think it's bullshit. I think that is no different than me literally hiring an editor to look over my work and make corrections. There's
Yeah.
literally no difference to it, but fairness in terms of then reality have nothing to do with one another.
Yeah, I mean, look, and if you don't like it, then open your own publishing company that uses AI. You know what I mean? Like, and that's what I tell
Exactly.
people. Like, if you don't like what's available, then be the change you want to see in the world, right? I think that was
Yeah.
Gandhi. Um,
And it's not as
And
easy, but
and we
again,
can figure out the accommodations to help you do that, right?
yeah.
Like I had a
Hmm.
client say to me once, she loves to go to the gym, but it's loud because they blast music for everyone. Now, she brought her own earphones. She uses like the loop earplugs, which like I have them on my keychain. I use them.
Yep.
And she still like wasn't happy. And I said to her, I was like, look, there's really not much else we can do unless you want to go take a business loan out and like you open up a neurodiversity friendly gym, or you are the manager of a gym who decides that we're not going to have music blasting. But then like, and that's fine. I don't know whether or not that's going to be successful. But I said to her, I said, just like you want modifications for quiet, there are some people who join gyms who can't afford the fancy over ear headphones or can't afford AirPods, right? So
Or
if they're
need
on the
body
floor,
doubling and need that space and that chaos and that
correct.
stimulation to be able to
Yes.
show up.
And for them to be able to access music like while they're lifting to get all that, like they need it blasted because not everyone can afford, like some people can afford like, a $15 a month gym membership, but they can't afford like headphones. It's not a priority. You know what I mean? I said it's gonna go both ways.
Yep.
So, and she's like, oh, but like, yeah, I don't know, like I said, it is something I sit with every day as someone who was late diagnosed, someone who sees this in the assessment world, who does therapy in this area. And, even the stuff on social media, if I open up my Instagram and go to the section where it's like, oh, here's all the memes and the shit that are applicable to you. And I see all this really fun and catchy ADHD stuff. I I'm like, oh, this looks good. And then I'm like, but wait, is it real? And I have to go back and like I am in the field, but like I'm in my own like place where it's like everything that I thought was about like was just me being like quirky and whatnot. I'm like, well, is that just my personality and quirkiness or ADHD? Like
Yeah.
I'm still kind of piecing out some of
Oh,
that stuff.
the amount of times we gaslight ourselves in our diagnosis, especially being late diagnosed and having
Yeah,
just to kind of go back and forth between what you just said is you learned like this is just who I am versus now I have this diagnosis and it makes sense. But you have those automatic memory thoughts, and it's like, whoa, my sister-in-law used to tell me about, how she would be doing this occasionally where she would hear something new about ADHD or something else, and she'd be like, wait, do I then actually have it? Like you have those moments of
thousand
gaslighting
percent,
all the time.
1000%. So I'll see what like, certain creators will do. And like I'm literally like, all right, let me just like hit up Google Scholar real quick or like go to a couple of my my trusted and true journals and like throw this in there. Like, is this ADHD? Or show me the articles on like ADHD and this and like and suss it out. And that's also why like I only will repost stuff on Instagram from like you and like three other people because I know it's vetted. I don't have the time to go fucking search. And like honestly, like some of this stuff overwhelms my little ADHD brain so much. And like I don't have the fucking time. I'm too busy seeing patients. But like this is my struggle as like a professional in the field. And I'm like, people who aren't like they accept a lot of this as at face value because they don't understand that what they're seeing may or may not be true. So then they come to my office and I'm like, okay, well, you actually don't have like ADHD or you don't have autism or you have one or not the other. You have this. I mean, talk about frustration tolerance. Like, forget it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I have to be the bearer of bad news because they've been getting all this incorrect information pumped into them for so long. They finally had the braveness and the courage to show up at my office. And I'm like, JK, here's actually what this is,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, I don't give a shit. Some of my other providers, they're like, I have a tough feedback. And like, we work through it and they're like, hit the decks. And I'm just like, man, like it's again, information overload, misinformation, and just being able when you keep getting the same message, the reinforcement over and over again, the window of tolerance shrinks. So then when I'm telling you something different, your inability to tolerate that in that moment
Mm-hmm.
is not there.
Okay, girl, I'm sorry. I have to finally interrupt you. My ADHD is like,
Please.
I'm like over
I
here.
mean,
Like, I had
yeah,
a fucking
please.
thought and I did so good right there. I did so good. Because what you're talking about too is I had Dr. Ludovico Saint Amor Chanez. Oh, if he's hearing this, I'm so sorry if I butchered your name. I should just leave it at Dr. Ludovico. And we talked about how grief is very interesting because when we talk about grief, like when you lose somebody, right? He had said that's hard, right?
Mhm.
As time goes on, other things distract you, other things come up. But when we're talking about grieving and learning our diagnosis, you live in this world 24 fucking 7. So nothing is distracting you, but rather it's always in your fucking face. And so what you just talked about is you needing to stop, pause, go look, reaffirm, understand. Most people don't know that that is an option, that that is part of their choice, and it has to be part of their toolbox, if you want to call it a toolbox or bag, because you constantly are having to remind yourself to challenge this world. I keep pointing out the window too,
I know.
because if you don't, you're going to get sucked back in because
Mhm.
that is the world you live in. And then you're going to gaslight yourself, or you're going to use it as a crux because it's easier, or crutch, not a crux. It's easier. It's just you go into that internalization like we all learned growing up.
Mhm.
And that goes back now also to expectations, right? Like, I think for you and I think we agree on this that expectations definitely play a role in how you're showing up. So if your
Mhm.
expectation is that your diagnosis is now going to make sense of everything, and it's going to finally give you access to a world that you did not have before said diagnosis, unfortunately, you are setting yourself up for failure because
Yeah.
that expectation is not the reality. And that is what I do with my work with my clients.
Yep.
And it sounds like you also do with yours.
I
The
mean, look,
expectations.
the reality of it is that that also, I'll throw a caveat in it. It also depends on the age and the needs of the client. So if I have a school age child, I absolutely am going to be able to unlock their world in terms of the accommodations that I will be able to put in place for that child at school.
Yeah.
Whether it's something as simple as time and a half. A lot of times we also uncover dyslexia because teachers
It's
are
common. Yeah.
actually, I don't want to shit on teachers. The system is very quick to say that, like, oh, they're having inattention issues. It must be ADHD. Because look, we did our job. We educated about ADHD. So when we
Not
see
well enough though.
inattention,
I'm gonna counteract
well,
that. I don't think we
I'm being
educated about
sarcastic
it.
in that.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm being sarcastic. Like, oh, look, we did our job. I mean, we had a case here in the practice where like that exactly happened. Um, this kid was diagnosed correctly with ADHD, but he had dyslexia. Now there were a lot of things that went wrong. COVID interfered. I mean, like this was literally the perfect storm. But then I can't help when I get a report from the district. I'm like, y'all fucked up, and they lawyered up, and they won, and we saw to it
Mm-hmm.
quite aggressively, actually. Like I had a conversation with the mom. I'm like, we're going to get nuclear on this. Here's the advocate. Here's the attorney. Like you've got a case and you're going to win it. And she did. But I also, again, like, for those of us in, so I don't work in the schools because child study teams are underfunded, understaffed, and the need is greater than ever because we're doing our job with educating and advocacy. And a lot of these kids are having issues in the classroom.
Yeah.
So stuff's going to get missed because there's deficits on that system support level too. But you can't, not everything is ADHD, right? It's being able to also yeah, educate enough to step back and say, okay, now we know what ADHD isn't just a behavior issue, but now we need to take a step back and take a broader lens and say, okay, it could be an attention issue, or there's like 3 or 4 other things that at school age level could be an attention, and we need to put certain modifications in place.
Mm-hmm.
And the same for work too. It gets dicier though when people get older because it's a fine line between you have a 504 legally we can put certain accommodations in place versus if the job description says you need to be able to do XYZ, there is a window in which we can function. If you are a cardiothoracic surgeon, we're not asking for time and a half for you to do your job. We're not.
Yeah.
We're not.
And I think that goes back, and
So
that's a
again,
very
like it's
similar
this.
example, like the marathon thing. Like there are just certain things that you can tweak, or you have the ability to gain access for accommodations, but then there are other things and dynamics where you don't. I had somebody on my podcast who specializes and works with corporate to help set
Mhm.
up their jobs, their administration or offices or whatever in
Yeah.
a ADHD neurodivergent friendly way. But even like they were saying that sometimes those things can only go so far, and the hard truth is that sometimes that environment just is not for you, and
Yeah.
then we have to figure out what do we do then from that point on. And I think, like, you know for you, a lot of people are listening to this, we're pistols, you and I. And I think
Yeah.
that's why you and I became friends. I found you on some other podcast. And one of the things that I loved was when you had, the question was like, what are your suggestions about assessments and evaluations, etc.? And you were just basically like, people need to stay in their fucking lanes.
I mean,
And I was like, oh, my heart. And a lot of people hear us and we're aggressive, but we're aggressive because the science backs this. This isn't just us spewing this shit out of our asses here. Like, the science backs it. And unfortunately, when we go into social media and you have people who are just like really good at promoting personalities, and they're saying things that are not correct, it's continuously feeding into the narrative
mhm,
of the other side of the idea that your diagnosis, so now everything should just be handed to you. And I know
mhm.
that sounds really harsh because there is this level of fairness I struggle with too. Like, even with my clients, when they tell me some of these situations, like that is so fucked up.
Yeah.
Okay, now we
Oh
got it
yeah.
out. What do we do? How do
What are
we
we
do
doing?
this? Because either we're going to stay here and we're going to keep showing up in our sessions and talk about how upsetting it is, or we're going to use our time together and figure out what do we do moving
Or
forward.
we can do both. Like that's the power of and. If you
100%.
want to come
Yeah.
in every session and like vent for 10 minutes, whatever, fine. As long as we're still
Mhm.
committing to doing the work. I'll do that till the cows come home. I still do that. This morning I'm getting ready and I'm like, like my daughters are getting older. I'm dealing with the preteen shit. Like, and I'm like, I can't even, we're gonna have to talk offline about that. But I'm just like, it is so fucking unfair that like I have ADHD, I'm a divorced single mom, and I have to deal with this all by myself.
Yeah.
Because as I'm being there emotionally for my children last night after like a long, fun Mother's Day stuff, by the time I got them down, I looked around my apartment, I'm like, I don't have the capacity to deal with this. It would have been really nice if like I could have been tending to the children and like another adult could have been
Yep.
straightening up or getting stuff ready for tomorrow. Like that shit just didn't happen. Like it is unfair. And there are things I'm angry about. And friend of mine who's also divorced, she said to me, she's like, Jessica, she's like, you have to make a choice if you as to whether or not like you want your anger to like be in the driver's seat. And I'm like, are you in some of my sessions? Because that's exactly what I say to my patients. But she's not wrong. Like we're susceptible to this too. Like
Yeah.
we are fierce advocates, but we're also human as well, and we have our own shit. So like I get it when people come in and like especially like the justice sensitivity, like
Yeah. And
that
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 pops
that
up.
like gets
Yeah.
me hot and bothered in all the wrong ways. And like that's an emotion regulation thing for me. The work that I put in, the mindfulness of like, Jessica, take a step back, take a breath. And by the way, practice that when you're not pissed off because good luck doing that. Like I said, Tom Brady didn't throw a football for the first time when he played the Super Bowl. He
Yeah.
practiced beforehand. That's what I tell people about mindfulness. Don't fucking tell me it didn't work. It's not going to work the first time because, as a matter of fact, the more mindful and aware you're getting, it's actually going to get harder because you spent so much time avoiding internal experiences because you didn't want to fucking deal with it. So yeah, now that you're tapping into it and I'm asking you to be still for 30 fucking seconds, yeah, it's gonna be hard.
Yeah.
Okay. But like look at the research, look at the imaging about how this actually works, and we can actually rewire the brain with consistency in this area. So do that and take your fucking meds and we can make magic happen.
Yeah.
But if you're not working with a practitioner who understands the science, and like my big thing I'm getting into now is like perimenopause and menopause. I've had to have arguments with psychiatrists who've told me I don't know what I'm talking about because I said I'm like they need to be on a stimulant because they've been on all the SSRIs and they're not fucking working. And then
Mhm.
when I looked at it from an ADHD lens, I was like, oh my God, like I even missed the diagnosis because you have women in their 40s coming in and it's like midlife crisis stuff. My kids are getting older and life transitions, and it's so obvious. And we're trained, you hear hoofbeats, think horse, not zebra. But
Mhm.
in this instance, it's actually zebra. So I said, I'm like, you need to go talk to your psychiatrist. I need to get on a stimulant. And then I have a psychiatrist calling me. I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. I was like, you want to bet? I gave these measures in office. I did this clinical interview. Why don't we fuck around and find out? I mean, we're not fucking around and finding out, but like, why don't you do what I'm asking you to do and let's see the change? And I haven't been wrong. By the way, they don't call and apologize. That's a whole different story. No ego in the game. But it's just, I don't know how we got to this place, but like it's
Because we have ADHD and we're
because we
just
have
flowing
ADHD.
with
I
the
mean, this is like the
emotions.
hardest part. But it's just, it's this bigger picture of advocacy. It's this bigger picture of staying in your lane. It's this bigger picture of the responsibility that we as clinicians have both in our offices and if we choose to take a social media presence of staying in our lane with what we know.
Yeah.
It gets very overwhelming because to your point, everyone thinks they know everything. So it's no surprise then that we get people in our office pissed off. And I will say this too, Leanne. I am going to hold about this much space of compassion for the coaching world. Because the problem is it's an accessibility issue. You and I talk about this. Like ADHD is an accountability thing, and how you can have people and a community to check in with. The mental health care system is not set up for that. I'm too expensive and I'm not taking insurance because I get paid shit. Right. So people can either work with me once a week and like I'm pretty damn good at what I do, but I can absolutely appreciate how people need support in between. And how I see my caseload is it's more concierge style than not
Yeah.
because of what I charge. I will give people limited access during the week for certain check-ins, prescribed check-ins.
Mm-hmm.
But for everyone else, if they want support, if they want accessibility, they're going to gravitate towards that world because it's fucking there. The only problem, is that not everyone's doing it as clean as they should.
Yeah.
So what do we tell people who might not be able to afford really good quality healthcare because the really good providers are not taking insurance. They don't give a shit about what we do, but they need support because I tell people all the time, the work is not done in the office. The work is done outside here in the real world. It's a big, big problem, but it's also left this incredible business gap for coaches and gurus and specialists and DM me for this book and this guide. But it's like, well, is it correct? Is it just generic AI shit? Is it actually going to work for you?
Yeah. Well, I always call it like sprinkles of help because we have to go back to the understanding that everyone is different. So you can have even a diagnosis, but how it shows up for you is going to be very different than somebody else.
I said that too.
Yeah. Yep. And, going back to just the mindful thing really quickly, because I know that you don't just work with individuals with ADHD. There are other people that you work with. And so I think it's really important too that when we talk about ADHD and the brain, like we're not necessarily going to be able to rewire our brain, but what we can do is through post reflection, which is a form of mindfulness, right? We can pick up on those patterns that you talked about. And when you pick them up, your deficit associated with the dysregulation can become less and less, which then makes you more available in the moment. And I think that's the problem most people don't understand. We're not changing how your brain is. We can. The science just doesn't show it when we're talking about ADHD. But what we can do is minimize those triggers that are causing you to become so dysregulated in the moment that now you don't have any access whatsoever. Right? Like, and that's the point. When you can be mindful and understand what is causing certain things, you can then be mindful to stop it from happening as often, minimize the dysregulation that then allows you to be more attentive in those moments.
Yeah. And like I said, breathing isn't going to cure everything. It'd be nice if it did, right?
I wish.
And I got shit on that one podcast that I had done where I had said, like, I always do a systems check with all of my patients. How are you eating, sleeping, hydrating, moving your body? And like, what's your self-talk like? Because I don't give a damn how much medication's in your system. If you are not taking care of your body, it doesn't matter. Now, people didn't listen to it. It was a great soundbite. People were like, oh, we need medication to do this stuff. Baby boy, baby girl, I never said you didn't. Yeah. But the reality of it is that your medication is going to work better when you're taking better care of yourself.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, there's a biological piece to it. We know that.
And that goes for all conditions. Like we don't give diabetics insulin and be like, go to town on chocolate and candy. We don't give cardiac patients blood pressure and cholesterol meds and not tell them about diet. Now, other conversation, but like the lifestyle issues that occur in the medical health world are the same here for us, but people don't want to hear that because again, expectation management, people call all the time and I ask it on my intake form, what do you want to get out of this? I don't want to have anxiety anymore. I don't want my ADHD to be a problem anymore. I don't want this. And I hit that from the jump. I'm like, I'm gonna tell you right now, like, that's not what this is about. And if you don't like that, this is not the place for you. But I'm also telling you, if you go and work with someone who's telling you that, they're straight up lying. There is the one hack. And that's why I even struggle with like my own social media stuff. I cannot for the life of me do a post that says the one hack that's going to help your executive dysfunction. But the funny thing is I find myself clicking on that because I'm like, ooh, did I miss something in the literature? No, it's fucking marketing. Yeah. But it just speaks, I think, to I think a combination of both the lower distress tolerance of people for a number of reasons and just the desperation.
Oh yeah.
For people to get help. And it's creating this perfect storm that like I have serious concerns about going forward, because I don't think we are setting up a very vulnerable population of in the neurodivergent world for long-term success. We're not doing it in the neurotypical world either,
No,
right?
we're
Like
not.
tablets,
Yeah.
technology, like
Mm-hmm.
all of that
Yeah.
shit. But especially for the folks who need additional supports to
Yeah.
get by in this big bad world or big beautiful world, there's room for both. We are doing them a disservice, and it's concerning.
Yeah, and I get it. And I think you speak volume to the work that I do, you do, and I'm sure other people in our realm do as well. When we have clients that come in and they think that this space is the space that's going to finally give them the answer, and we have to give the hard blow that there is no answer,
Yeah.
that this is what it is. And it's about becoming compassionate with yourself and having the days where you are stomping your feet due to the dysregulation and feeling unfair. And that's all normal, but not allowing those days to then cause you to stay stagnant.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
to take to your comment about the coaches, I understand wholeheartedly about that. And I get that that's why people would go there, right? It's easier, accessible. But the problem is a lot of those coaches are the ones that are perpetuating that same exact narrative. And that's not
Yeah.
to say all, because I do know that there are some really good coaches out there,
There
more
are,
so
there
the
are,
ones that
there are.
actually still have the license. But like they're perpetuating that narrative because that narrative keeps you coming back for more because you didn't actually get what you needed all along, which is understanding that you're not changing anything necessarily when we talk about the diagnosis. And you have to lean in and feel your feels and learn how to be accountable and deal with the discomfort of not everything is going to just go the way we want. And maybe we know should, but what do we do from there? Girl, I really appreciated this.
I don't want to end on such a downer note. My gosh, I feel
I know,
like,
but you know what? It's not honestly like
I
I
mean, it's the
know it
truth
sounds,
though. It's
but
the
listen,
ADHD realities. It's
and
the
I
reality.
think I think that actually is interesting, right? I don't want to end on such a downer note because you're right. That does sound down because it goes against everything that we wish it would
Mhm.
be. But I think us going on that route, it's not necessarily down. It's how you view it, right? I think that gains
It's a
access.
call to
We get,
action, I think, like
yeah, it
where this
is.
field needs to be going, like, and kind
100%.
of finding, getting away from the hardcore. It's funny, I just last week, I've been like really immersing myself in like autism, ADHD trainings. Number one, my CEs are up next month. Number two, there's just a lot of good stuff out there. And was it the American Academy of Pediatric Neuropsychologists? Like well-respected organization presentation. The entire like 3 hour talk was all about like the medical model of diagnosing an autism. And I'm just like, huh, like some of my more neuro like divergent focused colleagues would like absolutely be shitting themselves right now. But again, like I don't think we can. I think we're doing a disservice when we're not having conversations about expectation management, both internal, like what I am actually capable of doing and accomplishing. See how I'm wrapping up. I'm doing the thing, the end of session wrap up, right? Our own internal expectations and also like external to the world.
Yeah.
And in order to at least start forging these steps, like we need to have diagnostic clarity. I'm sorry, that comes from the medical model.
Yeah.
In and out. Like, do you meet this criteria or do you not? And that's where it gets tricky. And I think that's where my colleagues in the neuropsych world are doing fantastic research, because that's what's allowed us to understand the spectrum of ADHD, of autism. That's allowed us to broaden the criteria because we're learning more about what this is and what this isn't. Like we have to have a very clear demarcation that doesn't necessarily exist in, in the more like neuroaffirming world, like in or out.
You know what's interesting though, and I know I was going to end, but now you got me looped, is that going to the research, and this is a pattern that I've noticed too, we need the research to stop though always looking at the medical model, but using it as a way to show and represent in the research of what is a diagnosis versus then what is the social. And
Correct.
that is one of the biggest frustrating pieces while working on my dissertation, that nobody was talking about the environment. Everything was just related to ADHD, which also perpetuates that ADHD is the main cause, and it's not. And
Not
so the research is still even lacking to create space for us to then use medical model to help us shift towards the narrative you and I have been talking today. We
I
don't
mean,
even
but
have the science backing us in this
correct. I
conversation.
mean, and look, like graduate programs, especially at the doctoral level, you've got the scientist, you got the scientist practitioner model, which is heavy, heavy research, heavy
Mm-hmm.
research. And then you have the practitioner scholar model, which is mine and probably yours, which is research based, but more heavy in the clinical application of it.
Yeah.
So my job is to be able to understand and perform and write the research, like I'm a published author, but then also apply it. And one of the biggest difficulties in both medical and mental health is the application or what the science says and how it applies in the real world. Because when we're conducting experiments, when we're doing research, it is in a sterile environment, and it has to be. Because if we're trying to understand a mechanism, we need to minimize the noise
Yeah.
to understand a diagnosis, to understand if a medication works. We can't have confounding variables because people will literally die, especially if it's a medication trial. Like I worked for almost 3 years at Columbia in the anxiety disorders clinic on some of the most cutting edge OCD research studies at the time that looked at SSRI and antipsychotic use. Like there is no room for error when you're using experimental drugs on people.
Yeah.
With that being said, those same people then have to function in the real world. And how are we applying the research, which is I'm not going to disagree with this, is lacking, taking into account the one thing that we exclude in research, which is environment, which is, by the way, why shows like The Biggest Loser and The Bachelor and Bachelorette have such a high failure rate, because we are controlling the environment in them, and it makes for great TV, right? Because it's precision. Like you are literally setting up, you are designing like little like research clusterfucks, and I love that. But then none of those things work in the real world because we are not taking the environment into in account. But people eat that shit up because they love drama, and
Okay, so
it's
now
fun to
I'm
watch.
gonna say something else. I know we're at time, but I have to say it because what you
Go
just
for it.
said made me think of this. I have a lot of I've heard a lot about this program. I'm not gonna be able to name it correctly. I'm just gonna use one word, Hoffman. It's like a program that I think is out in California and in other states. I can't, I'm not for sure. But what it is, it's like almost like an inpatient thing. It's very structured. They set you up. They teach you all these things. They help you through it's a very wonderful program. Like I'm not discrediting it, but it sure as shit is not ADHD friendly. And the reason being for that is the second you're out of that environment, you're left to your own vices. Where is the environment that was set up, sterilized, if you will? And now you have to be the one to apply all these things. And again, for us ADHDers, and this is where like the accountability piece comes in, there are certain things that are going to be a lot harder for us to apply on our own. And if somebody else was in the room with you doing it and structuring it for you, and now you leave that environment, now you're thinking to yourself, well, wow, I'm really a failure because it was working there and it wasn't working now. And that is a very important piece of it because, again, it goes back to the environment. You're not a failure. You just were thinking that doing that was the answer. And that's the problem with ADHD. There's no fucking answer other than
the people want
breathing, accountability, self-compassion, and understanding every day is not the same as yesterday. And so you're going to have to always show up differently. That is the truth of our diagnosis.
Yes.
There is no consistency in our fucking diagnosis. There isn't.
There isn't. And I'll say this too, this is where the schools get it right. Like legally, when we are working with children that are classified and need an IEP or a 504 plan, we are legally mandated to be thinking about it in terms of the least restrictive environment. Because back in the day, all the kids that had problems, they just got thrown in their own classroom, right? They were excluded from being with their peers, and that didn't work either, kind of similar to this. So the schools are getting it right when we're thinking about each kid and being like, okay, how can we modify the environment to give this child the supports they need? Because for math, maybe we'll pull them out and we'll put them in the resource room for math, but we're going to push them back in for everything else because they don't need to be in a resource room for everything. Like that model actually works.
Because it's not a one size fits all model. It's literally looking at the person. How are you functioning? And what do we do to work with that functionality?
But the execution of it is problematic because of staffing, because of lack of understanding of a lot of things. So I think, I would say a call to action here is, I think for us to be, like, we get 50,000 feet on this. Like, I think it's a really good thing that we are talking more about this stuff. that we are talking about inclusivity. We are talking about neurodiversity. We're talking about understanding diagnoses. We're having debates over like the medical versus, the neuroaffirming neurodiversity model. Like this is good shit. Like I remember growing up, like seeing a Prozac commercial was just as, if not more disturbing, of seeing like a tampon or a condom commercial, like watching Family Matters on TGI Friday with my parents, like, oh my God, Prozac. Now it's like you see a commercial for Abilify, you don't even think twice about it. So I think we're headed in the right direction, right? I think we are at a pivotal point from in the history of our healthcare of what we're going to do about it, and how flexible, how inclusive, how supportive are we going to be of difference.
Yeah, I like that. I think you ended on a good note. And before I hit stop, I would love you to just tell everybody where they can find you if they felt your vibe is definitely their vibe. I will put all of that in the description, but please let everyone know where they can find you.
So we are, like I said, the name of our practice is Elements Psychological Services. Our website is elementspsych.com. Our practice is on Instagram. It's elements_psych. I also have my own handle. It's dr.jessica.mccarthy. But if you just Google me, Elements Psych, New Jersey, like we'll come up. Like I said, our offices are in New Jersey, but our doctoral level practitioners have something that's called SIPAC, so we can provide care. I think now it's over 40 states in the country. We don't do assessment virtually. I have a lot of opinions on that. There are people who do. I am not the one or the two on that. But for therapy, for what we call like executive function skills training, which is the marriage of teaching skills, but also the emotion regulation piece that is always left out of executive function coaching. We do that a lot for our college students. I actually personally work with a lot of executives in finance, in entertainment, in sports. And it's great because they travel all the time. So I'm able to still provide services. We work through children. We work with everyone. So find us, call us, we'll chat.
I really appreciate you being here. And I know for the listeners, this may have been an assumption of a neuropsychologist. Let's talk about ADHD and diagnosis, when in reality, this was just honestly a vent session between two professionals in the field talking about where our justice sensitivity comes in, where we see the work really helping and benefiting. And I hope this was helpful in terms of hearing the frustration side to our lives, but more importantly, maybe you picked up a thing or two and you can use that and either lean into it or maybe pause and keep you on your merry way and come back to this when you're ready, right?
When you're ready. I love that. It was so good to see you, my dear. As always, I'll have to send you pictures of my apartment later, dude. It's a fucking mess. Like
I love it. It's the
I'm at like a 3 out of 10 right now. Like we're not in a good place. We're not in a good place at all.
All right. Until next time, everybody, thank you for joining us and be well. Oof. Talk about a nice vent session, huh? So while that may have been a lot, I do believe it was a lot in probably the best way possible. You got two professionals in the field bitching, venting, talking about all the things that we do and how we show up for our clients, how we show up in our own lives. Again, as always, episodes are a sprinkle of help. They are not a replacement to any type of support by a medical professional. Please always consult a qualified professional if you need any type of support with a diagnosis or distress within your diagnosis. I just want to take a huge thanks for Dr. Jessica McCarthy for showing up in the real, raw, and fully caffeinated formation. Loved that she met my level. And if you're feeling fired up or even called out, hopefully lovingly, of course, you're definitely not alone. The world was not built for our brains, but at the end of the day, that doesn't mean we stop building lives that work for us. And sometimes that means having to grieve that not everything can and will be accessible, even with all the education we possess and all of the ways we know we can be accommodated. It's about finding systems that work with our brains, not against them, finding systems that are going to allow access, and if we cannot interact with one of those systems, finding ways to manage the frustration, the unfairness attached to those experiences. You can find Dr. McCarthy at Elements Psychological Services or check the show notes for all of her info. As always, it's about setting your environments, your relationship, and your sex up for success in ways that work with your ADHD brain, not against it. And until next time, be well.